80-year-old woman expelled from store, but everyone regrets it when they discover who she is. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Get out of here. This place is for people who can afford to buy, not for people like you. These words came from an elegant, refined lady named Victoria, directed at a young man who was poorly dressed, with messy hair and who didn't smell very good. My lady, I know I'm not in the best condition, but I managed to save some money to buy the book on display. If I look presentable, maybe I can get a job. The young man, Daniel, said humbly. But even those words didn't touch Victoria's heart. Daniel was at the entrance of the luxury goods store, but Victoria called a few security guards who removed him from in front of the store. Daniel then left peacefully, his face red with shame and sadness. Victoria watched him walk to the end of the block to make sure he wouldn't return. She was satisfied because that man could have disturbed the other customers. Victoria owned not only this store but also several high-end boutiques, art galleries, and a few exclusive beauty salons scattered across the city. After leaving the store, Victoria got into her car with her private driver. "Take me to the hospital. I have a terrible headache from all the stress I've had today," Victoria told the driver. He immediately drove to the hospital. Victoria was quickly attended to, took some medication, and underwent some tests. The results would only come out after a few days. Victoria was stressed. The situation with the young man who wanted to enter her store had made her angry. Victoria asked her driver to drop her off at an art gallery she owned, and then dismissed him, saying she would call him back when she was finished. In the gallery, Victoria purchased a rare painting worth $10,000, but that amount was nothing to her. The feeling of owning something so exclusive and beautiful made her happy and excited. Victoria left the gallery and looked for her phone to call her driver, but she had forgotten it inside the car. With no other option, the elegant lady looked for a taxi, but none appeared. Victoria began walking and searching in other streets, and without realizing it, she entered a deserted area. She started walking faster, but a man quickly grabbed her bag and the painting she had just bought. She screamed, but no one came to help her. To make matters worse, Victoria fell to the ground and got all dirty with mud. Her once impeccable hair became a mess. The man had already disappeared from her sight, and Victoria was still on the ground, crying and without help. After composing herself, she walked to a busier area and asked some passers-by for help, but everyone avoided her gaze. She didn't understand why they were refusing to help her since she had always been a well-treated person. Victoria only wanted to make a call to her driver to pick her up, but everyone refused to even look her in the eyes. She then cried silently and walked slowly back to the gallery where she had bought the painting. On the way, she looked at her reflection in a store window and only then realized her state. She looked like a homeless person. Her clothes, even though they were designer, were all dirty with mud, and her hair was in the worst possible state. This made her realize why no one spoke to her. A young woman passing by saw her crying and asked if she needed help. After explaining everything to the young woman, she lent Victoria her phone, and finally, Victoria was able to call her driver. She first went home to take a bath and get ready before going to the police station. At night at home, the feeling of being despised still lingered inside her. She had always been well treated, but a simple change had made her despised. This feeling lasted for days inside her. It was even worse than having lost her bag and the luxury painting she had bought, since that amount was negligible to her. The day of the return visit to the doctor arrived, and Victoria went for her consultation. The doctor was very serious, but he couldn't hide the truth. Victoria had an aneurysm that required surgery, but due to her age, the surgery would be risky. Victoria was between a rock and a hard place. If she chose not to have the surgery, she could lose her life at any moment. If she had the surgery, she also ran the risk of not surviving. This shook her. She left the hospital not knowing what to do. Her driver saw her crying silently in the back seat of the car, but said nothing because he knew her reputation for firing any of her employees over small things. However, she continued crying silently. The driver then said he knew a place where he liked to relax when he had problems. Victoria agreed to go there. It was an old mansion she owned, perched on a cliff overlooking the sea. The wind was relaxing, and the view was beautiful. Victoria thought about everything that had happened in the past few days. She had been mistreated because of her appearance, but she remembered doing the same thing to that young man the other day. She had never married or had children. If she passed away, everything she had built would be lost. She would have to pass her businesses on to someone because she didn't know how much time she had left. Victoria felt an emptiness in her chest. She had never done anything good for anyone, only for herself. Her life seemed meaningless. Victoria continued her days in deep thought. She noticed that some of her employees were similar to her. They mistreated people. Victoria decided to undergo the surgery, but she didn't trust anyone to manage her businesses while she was recovering, in case she didn't wake up from the surgery. At home, she decided to do something to put an end to it. Victoria went to her housekeeper and said, "I know you also make clothes on order. I'd like to ask you to make some special pieces of clothing for me. I promise you'll be very well paid." The housekeeper agreed and listened to how she wanted the clothes. The young woman didn't understand why Victoria wanted those clothes, but the next day they were already made. Victoria thanked her profusely and paid the young woman very well. Victoria then dressed up and went to her driver. He was speechless, and just as he was about to say something, Victoria said he would understand everything later. Victoria was wearing clothes that appeared dirty and torn, and her hair was so messy that she was unrecognizable. Her first stop was an aesthetic clinic she owned, one of the first businesses she had established. Victoria was only going to ask for a glass of water, but one of the attendants immediately called security. "This place isn't for you, old lady. You'd better leave, or I'll have to force you out of here." The manager appeared and immediately ordered that she be removed. "But I only want a glass of water," Victoria said, but they didn't even give her that. Victoria left the place and returned to the car. She was upset. Her driver quickly realized what she was doing and asked, "Would you like me to take you to another one of your stores?" She nodded, and he took her. Victoria was visiting each of her establishments to see where she would be well received. The next one was a high-end restaurant she owned, one of the most reputable in the city. Victoria entered with the same dirty, torn clothes, but this time she had a bag with a lot of money. When she entered, everyone looked at her. Victoria went to the counter and asked to have a meal. She also said she had the means to pay and showed the money. The attendant, finding the situation very strange, called the manager. When the manager saw Victoria, she gently told her to wait a bit and that she would be attended to soon. Victoria smiled, thinking she might have found someone worthy of working for her. While she waited, Victoria noticed that the manager and the attendant were whispering to each other until the attendant picked up the phone and dialed only 3 numbers. Realizing the situation, Victoria hurried out of the restaurant and asked the driver to leave immediately. "What happened, madam?" the driver asked. Victoria then said, "They found it strange that someone dressed like me had so much money and probably called the police." She dialed only 3 numbers. She must have been calling 911. Her driver asked how she noticed this so quickly. Victoria said with a sad look, "Because it's something I would have done in the past." Victoria and her driver visited several of her establishments, but none of them welcomed her. There was only one place left. Victoria stood in front of the luxury boutique, very discouraged, but decided to enter. As she entered, another person entered with her. It was the same young man she had expelled because of his appearance, but he didn't recognize her. She stood at the entrance of the store and watched every step Daniel took. He was still wearing the same clothes from that day. The manager went directly to him. "Henry." The manager shook the hand of the young man named Daniel. Victoria realized it wasn't the first time he had been there. Victoria paid close attention and heard the entire conversation. Henry spoke. "Did the jacket you bought here that day fit well?" Daniel then said, "Yes, it fit perfectly, but now I managed to save a little more money, and I can buy shoes and a tie. That way, I can finally look presentable for a job interview. People never let me into stores because of my appearance. I was even expelled from another store by a very rude and mean lady. Only you welcomed me. It must have been a horrible situation, but if you're looking for a job, maybe we can help you. I can arrange a position for you in inventory management. The salary isn't great, but it could help you." Daniel, with his eyes shining and almost crying, said he would definitely accept. Daniel tried to hug Henry out of happiness, but realized he was dirty and not very presentable, so he stepped back. Henry noticed this and said it was no problem. He went ahead and hugged Daniel himself. Finally, he told him to come back tomorrow to start working. Daniel then left the store and forgot to buy the clothes he had intended to. Henry saw Victoria standing there and went to assist her. Despite Victoria's appearance, Henry treated her very well. Victoria said she needed some cheap clothes, but they had to be cheap because she had little money. He took her to the sales section and showed her some clothes. Victoria picked 2 items and said she would take them to the checkout. She was also well attended, and as she left, the security guard opened the door for her and wished her a good day. But before leaving, she asked Henry why he was assisting her. His function was to manage, and he didn't need to attend to someone like her. Henry said he liked being on the front line to know how everything was going, and not just staying in an office pretending to work. Outside, Daniel was sitting on a bench, eating a snack. Victoria went over to him. Before she could say anything, Daniel, seeing her appearance and thinking she might be hungry, offered her a piece of what he was eating. Victoria thanked him, but said she didn't want any. She took the bag with the clothes she had bought and gave it to him, saying it was a gift. Then she left and went to the car. When Daniel opened the bag, it contained shoes and a tie. Daniel was surprised and looked around to thank the lady who had given him those, but she had already disappeared. With that gift, he could return the next day to the store, dressed properly, to work. The next day, Victoria returned to the store, but this time dressed as she always did, with her jewelry and designer clothes. Henry noticed that the store owner had entered and went to her. He said he was available for anything she needed. Victoria said she wanted to check the inventory, just for a routine inspection. In the stockroom, Daniel was already working. When he saw Victoria, he felt a chill down his spine and froze. He immediately thought she would expel him from there, just as she had done the other time. Victoria looked at Daniel and said, "I have high expectations of you. Keep being as hardworking as you always have been. I'm sure you'll rise a lot in my company. And one more thing, this outfit looks perfect on you. I may have a cold heart, but I undoubtedly have good taste in matching clothes. Have a great day at work." Victoria left with a smile, leaving Daniel very confused but happy to have a job and not be expelled. A few days later, Victoria held a meeting with all her managers. She explained her health situation and said that some managers would be dismissed because they were not in line with the new mentality of her businesses. Finally, she pointed out that Henry would be her successor and would manage all her stores. Henry stood up, stammering as he thanked her for the opportunity. Victoria asked him to sit down, saying her choice was based on his effort and excellent customer service, as well as his exceptional resume. Victoria was finally able to undergo the surgery. She was nervous, afraid she might not survive, but happy to perhaps redeem herself. As she entered the operating room, she felt her entire life flash before her eyes. Victoria wanted to do more for people. Unfortunately, she realized the harm she had done to some people only recently. It was a risky surgery, and she might not wake up. The doctor administered the anesthesia, and Victoria closed her eyes. She dreamed of when she was a child, running through the fields. She dreamed of her first love and her first heartbreak. She dreamed of her entire life. Then everything went dark. Calm down, calm down. Everything went well. Try to rest. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.